Hey everybody, I'm going to introduce this video with this clip here. Basically, the screen capture broke in the middle of the video, so you're not going to be able to see me talking about things as you usually do. The fortunate thing is because I'm working on making sure that the podcast and the YouTube videos are consistent, so you can follow anything on the podcast. I describe everything on the screen on purpose, and so that you can follow on the podcast. Even though you're not able to see the screen, you're able to follow along if you're able to pull up the papers that I talk about as I'm talking about them. And hopefully it doesn't matter anyway because it's already formatted in such a manner as to be consistent with the podcast. I don't usually watch the videos that I do. I usually just blow through them. I usually just kind of go by feel. I don't overthink too much because I'm constantly trying to learn, and I don't want to over criticize myself because if I do that, I'm not going to actually get through, the videos. One thing I learned in this by watching myself in full screen is, holy shit, I need to fucking clean up. Sorry, excuse my language. I need to clean up because I look like I'm aging. It can be dealt with, but holy shit. I don't get much sleep anymore. You guys know I have kids and all that stuff, so I need to work on some of this, and I will. But that's one thing I'll be working on. So, for yours truly, so that I'm more beautiful for you to behold, I vow to begin working on these things and taking resveratrol so that I can look like David Sinclair, who actually probably just had a bunch of plastic surgery, to be honest. All right, cool. So, hope you guys enjoy the video. It's a pretty good one. Peace out. Hey everybody, in this video I'm going to be talking about Andrew Huberman and Rhonda Patrick again with respect to cold exposure. Everybody knows who Rhonda Patrick is. She's the multi-time guest on the Joe Rogan Experience, maybe 10-time guest, a lot. I think she did her postdoc at UCSD, and she's just phenomenal. I'm trying to come up with the right word, health influencer. To put things in neutral terms, and I think she's 400,000 followers on Twitter, and then Instagram it's huge as well, and so she's massive. And then we also have Huberman, who's a professor at the Stanford School of Medicine, a PhD researcher, well-established, legitimate neuroscientist, and explosive health influencer over the last 1 or 2 years. He's gone from nothing to at the very top of the health influencer pyramid. Both of them have quite exceptional backgrounds, especially Huberman. Huberman's pedigree is quite good, and he's an extraordinary speaker and orator and communicator, incredibly persuasive, charismatic, and likable. Unfortunately, that doesn't mean he's reliable. So I just made a tweet, and I want to share this because I think this encapsulates Huberman's rise to success. So I said, to become famous as a health influencer, you have to say something new. The easiest way to say something new is to say something wrong. Correspondingly, the majority of famous health influencers systematically say things that are wrong. Sadly, it's how the system works. I think this is absolutely 100% the case with Huberman and countless others, but in particular with Huberman. He leverages an incredibly persuasive speaking style with a lot of scientific background to make very partial and incomplete and not scientifically comprehensive cases for this or that modality for health. Meaning, he only presents one side of the story, one part of the evidence, and not the part that will qualify and will suggest that, whoa, we should slow down a little bit, but only the parts that make the particular modality or intervention seem amazing or miraculous or awesome, and not the nuance or the negative side, the downside. And by systematically presenting modalities in this way, without discussing what the downsides are, he's risen to extraordinary fame online. He makes people excited about all these different modalities without telling them the full truth about them. And this is what this is probably the rule. This is the algorithm. This is the method. This is the way to gain rapid prominence as a health influencer. The other way, of course, the flip side of that is to denounce the establishment and say the establishment is wrong about everything, et cetera, et cetera. That's just the mirror image of the same strategy. But to have an unnuanced, polarized, black and white view that doesn't reflect the actual science. It doesn't reflect the science. This isn't politics. This isn't religion. This is science. Science means having a comprehensive view of all of the evidence and presenting it clearly and honestly. And Huberman doesn't do that in a systematic manner. He systematically avoids presenting the actual evidence in a balanced manner. Okay, now what am I going to be talking about with respect to Huberman and Rhonda Patrick here? I'm going to be talking about their claims about cold exposure. Before I show you a video of Huberman, I want to summarize, and then you guys can watch the video, see his words that he uses, and then we're going to break it all down. So his argument is that cold exposure increases beige and brown fat by norepinephrine, turning on different kinds of genes inside the white fat cells to turn them beige or brown. And this beigeness or brownness is driven by mitochondrial density. And the more mitochondria you have in the fat, especially a certain kind of mitochondria that produces a lot of heat, the more beige or brown they're going to be. So these fat cells, these normal white fat cells, when the person is exposed to cold, they turn into beige or brown fat cells and start producing heat instead of simply storing energy. And by producing heat, they increase the energy expenditure of the person who has them, or animal, as it were. And by increasing the energy expenditure, they make it easier to stay in a caloric deficit, easier to achieve a caloric deficit at a higher caloric intake. Because if you have a higher calorie output or energy output, then you can have a higher energy input while still remaining in a caloric deficit. This allows people to lose weight easier. All right, this is total bullshit. It's not supported by the evidence, and here's why. Cold exposure is a lot like exercise. Exercise is not an effective weight loss modality. It can be effective for weight loss maintenance. There's some debate about that, and that's a very interesting aspect of it. But in general, to the degrees to which most people do exercise, it's not an effective weight loss modality. In some cases, it causes people to gain weight. Why? There's two mechanisms. It doesn't really matter which one is true. Both of them are partly true to some degree, but there's two mechanisms that underlie a basic process. This process is compensation. So these two mechanisms are an increased energy intake. So when you exercise, you get hungrier. When you get hungrier, you make up for the energy output by putting more energy in. So you eat more, and you don't lose any weight. Okay, you can exercise your ass off, improve your body composition, get more muscle, lose some fat, but stay roughly the same weight. Or even body fatness, maybe even gain weight. You gain muscle, you just maintain fat because your body's trying to fight to maintain fat. That happens to people. Okay, the other mechanism underlying this compensatory effect is that you reduce your energy and expenditure during your periods when you're not exercising. So you might rest more, you might be a little bit more sluggish. I know that whenever I'm training hard, man, I can get blasted during the day. Like I feel like a truck hit me, I don't want to move. And that might be one of the reasons why. Okay, so those are the two mechanisms. More recently, the second mechanism of down-regulating energy expenditure outside of the exercise period has been really put forward and argued for by Herman Poncer at Duke. But whatever the mechanism it is, exercise for these reasons is not effective. So even though you would expect to make it easier to maintain a caloric deficit, if you increase your energy expenditure, it actually doesn't get any easier at all, because you just have a much stronger drive to eat and not to move outside of exercise period. So you're going to end up expending the same amount of willpower or effort to maintain a caloric deficit, but you've just added exercise into the mix. That doesn't mean you shouldn't exercise. Exercise helps with inflammation. It improves metabolic function, it improves body composition function. In the long term, there's all sorts of benefits to exercise. But the main benefit to exercise is not weight loss. And weight loss is probably not even one of the minor benefits. Weight loss is basically, exercise doesn't impact weight loss very much. Diet does. So as they say, as the bros say, and the bros are correct about this, abs are made in the kitchen. Okay? So, the same situation applies to cold exposure, all right? What I've just said, just replace exercise with cold exposure. You get compensatory mechanisms, increased energy intake, and or decreased non-exercised energy expenditure, or in this case, non-cold exposure energy expenditure. Okay, that's why Huberman's wrong. And here's the thing, Huberman knows a lot. He knows an extraordinary amount of information. He knows this stuff. He knows what I'm telling you, but he doesn't present it to you, because what he also knows, as a very intelligent man, is that if he presents this information, he's going to be less popular than if he doesn't. He doesn't present the truth on purpose. Let's go look at some of his statements and look at some of Rhonda's statements, see how they're wrong. Then we're going to go through the literature and show what I just explained. We're going to show that that's what the evidence says, that compensatory mechanisms override the energy expenditure increase. We show thereby that Huberman and Patrick are both pushing bullshit. Let's get to it. Here is Huberman's video. Using deliberate cold exposure for health and performance, Huberman Lab podcast number 66. It was uploaded, it doesn't have the date here, does it? Can't find it. It's gotta be the date here. Wow. I think it was uploaded early this month. In any case, I'm at the timestamp 1 hour and 18 minutes, and we're gonna be starting from that point at 1 hour and 18 minutes out of this clip on YouTube. Let us begin.
Deliberate cold exposure converts one particular kind of fat cell, the white fat cell, which is a very low metabolic output cell. It's basically a storage site for energy in the body, fat cells, to a different type of fat cell, which is the beige fat cell, called beige because it's actually beige or slightly brown under the microscope, or even to brown fat cells, which are very dark under the microscope, and dark because they contain mitochondria and are very metabolically and thermogenically active. In other words, white fat doesn't burn many calories. It's basically a storage site. It's a bank account for energy. It's filled with lipids, and those lipids can be used if the body needs energy and if it goes into a caloric deficit. Beige fat and brown fat acts as sort of a furnace, or the sort of fat that you would find in a candle, a fuel that can increase core body temperature. So beige fat and brown fat is very good at raising our metabolism and helps burn white fat.
Helps burn white fat.
It does that only in the context of a caloric deficit, but it can actually help create that caloric deficit. Having more beige fat and brown fat can increase your
He said beige and brown fat can help create that caloric deficit. As I've just shown, it can't. Why? Because there are compensatory mechanisms in the body that detect this process going on and fully compensate for it by increasing eating drive and non-exercise energy expenditure, decreasing the latter, such that creating the calorie deficit is just as hard as it would have been without the cold exposure. Okay? So he's just freaking wrong. He's freaking wrong. Let's keep going.
Overall core metabolism, in other words, the number of calories that you burn per day, and therefore the number of calories that you need to either maintain or to lose weight. The simple translation of this is that getting in...
Okay, so that's it. Let us now look at the literature. Actually, let's look at Rhonda's stuff first. She's going to make the same claim, then we're going to look at the literature showing each of these people are wrong. It says, the activation, and this is at the metabolic health portion at the bottom of the screen, or the middle of the screen now, I've highlighted it, metabolic health under cold exposure therapy. So it's foundmanfitness.com/topic/cold-exposure-therapy. Metabolic health is the section, and the sentence starts out, the activation of non-shivering thermogenesis in people with obesity or type 2 diabetes may be an effective therapeutic strategy to aid in weight loss and improve metabolic health. People with higher percent body fat typically have less brown fat. However, cold exposure increases brown fat volume and activity in people with high body fat. So she's saying, she's implying that the activation of this thermogenetic process in people, again, quote, in people with obesity or type 2 diabetes may be an effective therapeutic strategy to aid in weight loss. It is not an effective therapeutic strategy to aid in weight loss. It is not such a strategy. This is bullshit. This is freaking bullshit. And I'm censoring myself there. I'm so close to saying another word. This is total bullshit. It is not. It is not. Okay, let's look at what the actual evidence says. Yes, it's right here. Here is what the animal evidence says. Collectively, studies employing animal models, rodents and pigs, report increases in energy intake, that is food consumption, increases in energy intake to match the metabolic demands of cold exposure. An increase that seems to be associated to the magnitude of the cold stimulus is suggested by a reanalysis of available studies, blah, 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 blah. There is an increase in energy intake to match the metabolic demands of cold exposure. And it says this increase in energy intake ranged from 15% at 6 degrees Celsius to 170% increase in energy intake at negative 23 Celsius, like well below freezing, which on average resulted in a 77% increase in energy intake if you look up all the studies together. You summate them. Now it says, whether or not, and by the way, it takes according to this particular paper, and it's called Humans in the Cold, Regulating Energy Balance in Obesity Reviews by Kurt McInnes, Francois Hamann, and Eric Doucette, published in December 21st, 2019. This paper also shows earlier, and we can't go through all of the text here in this video, it's just too technical, but it shows earlier that you have to get to a really, really low temperature, below freezing, for calorie intake not to match the metabolic demands of cold exposure. like a really low temperature for a long time, to such a degree that the animals are so cold and shivering so hard they can't possibly match. They can't possibly match those metabolic demands by increasing their food take enough. And one of the differences between rodents and humans is that rodents can do that to 100% of their maximum oxygen capacity, like their maximum ability to use oxygen. Humans can only do up to 40%. In chronic cold acclimation studies, humans don't lose weight. We're going to the end of the paragraph. Given that the weighted average revealed no changes in weight during the trials, it could be assumed that energy intake increased to match the cold-induced increase in thermogenesis. However, it is also possible that the individuals decreased free living energy expenditure as seen in animals, as I've just mentioned. In section 5, we're going to have something called cold exposure, ad libitum, energy intake, and appetite. It says, to date, only 2 studies have directly examined the effects of acute cold exposure on ad libitum energy intake. And we're not going to go through all the details of these because it's just going to take too long. Although not significant, a clear trend denoting an increasing hunger of 29% fall in cold exposure was observed compared with the control condition. And then another one, they saw an energy intake increase of 900 kilojoules when individuals were exposed to 16 degrees Celsius compared to the average increase in energy expenditure of 500 kilojoules. Meaning the energy intake increased by 900 kilojoules, whereas the energy expenditure only increased by 500. So they actually ended up taking in more energy than they expended through their cold exposure. Similarly, in the Langeveld study, energy intake increased by magnitude of 138 kilojoules compared with 48 kilojoules in energy expenditure. So again, more energy intake increase. These results seem to suggest that acute cold exposure increases energy intake by a much larger magnitude than energy expenditure. These results suggest that cold exposure is orexigenic, that is to say, it induces eating behavior. Anorexigenic would be induces like anorexia. Orexigenic means it induces like wanting to eat. And it says, although these results are partial at best, we don't have enough evidence. Okay. So what the conclusion says at the end of this review is very clear. It says, boom, 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 boom. Sorry, see, it's the end of the abstract. It says, although more studies, we could just reread this. Chronic cold exposure studies have been shown to produce minimal changes in body weight with an average of compensation of 126%, meaning more compensation than the energy expenditure. So actually increasing your body weight from cold exposure. Although more studies are required to investigate how cold impacts energy intake in humans, the results presented in this review warrant caution before presenting or considering cold exposure as a potential adjunct to weight loss therapies. Guess who's not being cautious? Certainly not Rhonda, Patrick, or Huberman. And here's one reason why they should be cautious. Here's one reason why. So in the BBC, this was reported 11 hours ago, this woman died from cold water therapy in this place called Derbyshire. Sounds like a Hobbit place, but it's in the UK. Anyway, I don't want to make more jokes. This person died. So she's a 39-year-old woman. She was a 39-year-old woman. She died as a result of reportedly immersing herself into the river as part of a cold water therapy session. There's this guy named Kevin O'Neill of Breatheolution who took her there, influenced by similar ideas as the ones I'm talking about here. This intervention is not without risks. You can die from too much cold exposure if you do it wrong. And this is a guy who had a company he had experience, and she died. So this is not an intervention that's not without risks, so we should know exactly what the benefits are. And if we overhype the benefits, which is what Huberman is doing in order to get more followers and make more money, and what Rhonda Patrick is doing in order to get more followers and make more money, then people can die without actually getting the benefits that are being promised to them. Whenever we recommend an intervention or make a recommendation online, we should have a relatively clear idea of what the risks and benefits are. Or we should be transparent about our lack of knowledge about what the risks and benefits are. And if we're not being responsible science communicators. We're being irresponsible. And we can harm people as a result, which is what this person, this Kevin O'Neill, unfortunate name, Kevin, there's another Kevin. This Kevin O'Neill did. He harmed this woman. And the people who influenced him harmed this woman. We need to know what the real benefits are and the real potential for harm in order to make a recommendation that's likely to have more benefit than harm. And Rhonda Patrick and Huberman are not doing this. They're not concerned with this. They're concerned with their clout. Now, everybody, look, if you're on social media and if you have more than 10 followers and you're on, and you're making tweets, you're making videos and stuff, you're concerned with clout. You want more people to watch your stuff. You want more people to pay attention to you. That's how the system is driven. Most people who are on, we want people to hear us. There's nothing wrong with that. But we have to have ethics. And the biggest health influencers in this space are driven in unethical manners. They're driven in a way that doesn't prioritize ethics. It sets it to the side. It is not concerned about these kinds of questions. So, take that away. Hope you take that away from what I've just talked about, or take away whatever message you want. Just learn maybe about cold exposure and how you don't need to do it to lose weight now. It's just going to waste your time if that's your goal. And then check out my YouTube at Kevin Bass, K-Bass Philadelphia, my Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Patreon at Kevin and Bass, KEVINNBASS. Check out my website, thedietwars.com. You can support me, dietwars.com/support-me. You can also click, and subscribe. Click like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how I'm doing. Let me know how you think I'm doing, what I could do better. I take all your feedback very seriously, and I continue making improvements. So that is super helpful. And share it. Go to Apple Podcasts and write a review, please. That would be super appreciated. One of the number one things they need you to do. Apple Podcasts, write a review, and also you can rate it on iTunes, on Spotify if you're on Spotify. That would also be super helpful as well. Check out my podcast at The Kevin Bass Show. That is the podcast to check out if you want to do those things. Thanks for watching the video. Catch you guys later. Keep supporting my stuff. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.